The biggest issue most beginner players have when they play chess is what to do in the middle game. So a lot of the videos that I've done on this channel have been about openings, but what do we need to do when we get to the middle game? What are some good positions that we need to kind of take our game to the next level? So in this video, we're going to be using the book Improve Your Chess Pattern Recognition that helps identify good middle game moves to help you improve your middle game. And there are 11 basic moves that we're going to be going over today. So without further ado, let's begin. So the first game that we're going to be looking at is the Octopus. So all these games that we're going to be looking at are about grandmaster games or very high level chess games where we've seen these before. So the first position that we're looking at is an Octopus. What is an Octopus, you say? An Octopus is when you're white getting your knight over here to d6. By doing this, once these pawns have passed, there's nothing that can really take this knight other than a piece of equal value. So the thing that you want to do when you have an Octopus knight like this is you want to trade off, say if you're white getting this d6 square, you want to trade off the dark squared bishop, and if you're black and you want to get to this d3 square, you want to trade off the light squared bishop on white side. So the nice thing about this Octopus is after this move here and you get this Octopus, this knight now controls so many squares on the opponent's side of the board, and that makes it really hard, especially for these rooks and this queen, to do anything on this back line as long as this is here. So one thing that a lot of people say is this knight is now worth a rook, basically. And especially once you get this pawn up here and lodge this knight in, it's really hard to get rid of this knight. So you want to make sure that this knight doesn't happen to you, but it's also really good when you have this knight yourself. So again, the Octopus knight, very powerful because it controls 8 squares within your opponent's territory, and that is characterized by getting a knight over here on d6, and if you're black, getting your knight over here on d3. The next position we're going to be looking at is another knight move, and it's typical in a lot of Ruy Lopez positions and Italian game positions. It's getting this knight over here to f5, and especially against the castled queen, a castled king. So you see here, the knight gets in here. It's hitting this bishop. You don't really want to damage the structure if you're black, and that's what makes it so formidable. In this game, they get their pieces active and try to harass this king as much as possible and jockey for the best position. And at this point, black really just needs to trade this off, but he can't really do that in this position because now the queen's coming in with a really scary attack with the bishop sack here. And so at this point, white liquidates the killer knight when it's ready, and it's really hard for black to even come up with anything, and it leads to black losing their game. So killer knight's characterized by this f5 square, and it leads to a lot of tough positions for black. We have the Octopus knight here on d6, killer knight over here on f5, 2 middle game positions with your knights that you want to know. The next position that we're going to be looking at is called the center back knight, and that's characterized in this position. White has this passed pawn here, and it's backed up by this pawn as well. So what the center back knight does is it brings his knight over here to d6, stopping the advance of this d5 pawn, but also attacking the pawns that support it in the middle. And through this, it makes it really hard for your opponent to, one, advance the pieces around the knight, and it's a good defensive tactic. I actually had this in my game today, and I realized I had a center back knight, and it was really, really powerful and made it really hard for my opponent to break through. I ended up winning that game. It usually happens on this d6 or d3 square whenever the center pawns here have this advanced pawn position. So that is the center back knight. So our next position here is when you dominate from the edge. So that's characterized by either going to a5 or a4 if you're black, and it's shown by in this position here, knight goes to a4 looking to attack this b2 pawn. White pushes up to c3 with the queen attacking that, and black latches in this knight here on a4 with this b5 move. And what it does is it basically shuts down this whole queen side. So this queen can't really go anywhere because it's going to lose this pawn. And once it gets there, it's attacking the center on the back rank file here. So white's just doing its best to try to improve its position, and black just continues with its plan and taking care of most of it. So once that queen took that pawn, white came here, attacked that rook, causing issues with it, and now you have a knight here on the back rank that is causing a lot of problems, and black says, hey, let's go to an endgame, and coming back to attack this pawn. Black ends up winning later in this game. So it's usually said that the knights on the rim are grim, but in some middle game positions, if it's advantageous for you to attack the queen side that is looking very weak, this knight on a4 or a5 might be a good place for you to attack. All right, we're getting into a little bit more complicated positions now. So this one is called Surplace Surplace and Priest. It's a French term. I don't think I'm saying it right. I'm probably butchering it. And it's when going here to G5. And you're probably saying, well, that's silly. You're just going to lose your knight. But what's great about this is say that they take and you take here, you now open up this rook file and you got a really tough time and the queen's going to go. So the knight placed here on G5 can be very deadly against the castled king. So in this game, you can see here how powerful this knight is. It abandons the king side to try to attack on the queen side themselves, but white just slowly improves its position and takes advantage of the fact that they can't move this pawn because of the now open file right here. And when the time is right, white finally strikes back. And at this point, this game is over because you just have to get this queen here with this and it's done. So white kind of puts on a clinic. Obviously, this is a grandmaster game, so they're going to put everything in there, deploy everything to make sure that they don't get checkmated here. So this is where everything that happens. So that's where the knight here on G5 can be a very strong tactic when you have the rook here on this file. So this one is called the not so innocent bystander. And that happens when you move your knight over here to this position on H5. So you're thinking, hey, this is probably not the best knight, one being on the rim, and you don't really have many attackers going with this, so it could be really easy to kick out. But coupled with this bishop, it can lead to some issues. And once you get the rook over, it's going to be really hard to stop. And you can see here that black kind of tears apart its king side, ends up winning the game. This knight here, while getting on the rim is sometimes a problem, you can use it to your advantage if you have the right piece placement to help with that attack. This one is an interesting position. So it's called the lost bishop. And so a big thing that you don't want to do is sometimes take this pawn, because what will happen is black will just lock it in and you're going to lose the bishop eventually. But in these games and the examples that it showed me, it showed that actually that's not like exactly true. And some of the times it's used as an advantage for you because it rips open the king's position, but also like sends resources over to kick out the bishop. I actually had this in a game earlier today too, where I locked in a bishop, but I couldn't do anything about it. And it actually became a nuisance. And they ended up beating me because I wasn't able to do anything about it. And it prevented any piece activity on the back rank. So in this, white uses it to rip open the king side, and you can see here that black is completely undeveloped, and black went on to lose this game all because of that bishop move that most people would say is a dead bishop by letting it get captured. This next position is a really fun position, and it is called like the murderous twin guns, and it's basically when you get your bishops on these long diagonals here. So this is a game I think with Vishianan. And using the powerful bishops here, they basically tore up white's position. You can see now that the center's gone, these bishops are super deadly. And once you get into the queen to the game, this is going to be a quick checkmate. But in this game, you just slowly improve the position, made it real hard for white to do anything, and it ended up getting the checkmate, all because of the pressure that those two bishops exerted on this long diagonal file. So if you have two bishops in the middle to late game, they can prove to be very advantageous if you're able to get them on these long diagonals aimed at the king. Now, we're gonna be looking at, it's called the Deceptive Bishop from C1 or C8. So a lot of this comes in the King's Indian's position, where you don't really use this bishop unless it's for a specific purpose. You can see here that this bishop is actually very useless according to this position. It can't go here, and then anywhere it really goes on this file, it's going to be killed. So in a lot of positions, you're like, well, this is a useless bishop. This is good. We should use that to our advantage if you're white. But in the King's Indian, you'll find that it's actually an advantage. One, it's defending, it's backing up this pawn, and it's used very much in the end game here when a piece when the bishop just needs to be sacrificed. It is definitely very helpful to use that piece to get your winning position. So now that pawn is gone, you bring the knight in. One, it's a great knight because of its position. And then bringing in the queen here, now that bishop's here, it's useful. So what it wasn't very useful in the middle game turned into be a very useful thing. And now that the rook is over here defending this queen, we're ready for that bishop sack right here. You can't take back because it's checkmate. And then black just cleans up and wins the game. So not always is this bishop on C8 a useless thing if the position allows it. Sometimes in a later position, you might use it to end up giving you the advantage later on. So next up, we're going to be looking at the Beastly Bishop. This is number 10 in our list. And that is when you get a bishop here on E3, or it's any of these central squares. It's much like an octopus, but instead of a knight there, there's a bishop there. So in this game, you can see here, this bishop is here on E3, controlling this diagonal here, making it very miserable for white to do anything. Its king is basically locked in here. And black uses that pressure to improve its position very, very well. It gets the pawns here to back up the bishop. And once it does that, it's free to use its other pieces to launch an attack of its own. So you can see here, it just slowly takes apart white's king side. And it basically leads to white can't really do anything because of the pressure this bishop is exerting. And it leads to just checkmate later on. And in this position, white's lost. There's nothing it can really do to win. And black ends up with the victory. The last position that we'll be looking at today is probably one of the more complex positions. And it goes with taking the pawn on B2 or G7 if you're white. Now, normally this is a bad idea, and we'll show you in this example why it's a bad idea. So the queen here takes, your opponent will normally kick this knight out, leading to this and getting your queen in a lot of trouble. So what a lot of people do is after they reach their objective, they retreat the queen and kind of say, great. But that opened up a lot of lines for white here, and you can see here that it kind of pushes the queen around and takes away black's any attacking chances and slowly launches a queenside attack that ends up being black's doom in this game. And what the author of the book is recommending is, instead of allowing this to happen where white just got a supreme position and end up winning this thing, is instead of retreating back here, to just keep the queen here and harass around. Sometimes it doesn't mean that you just need to get it back. Make sure you obviously don't get your queens trapped, but it could have been very beneficial to either stay on B2, go to C3, and just harass this position more and make white sweat a little bit. So those are the 11 positions that you'll typically see in the middle game. In our future video, we're going to be going over 11 exercises to kind of go over these positions and see if we can find them within our own positions ourselves and see if we can apply that into the real world. That video will be here. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Goodbye.